So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We're excited to share some more information on using social media to recruit participants for market research. I'm George Kuhn, owner and president of Drive Research. I also have our awesome marketing manager here, Emily Carroll, who is going to help us walk through this presentation and take some of the next steps.
All right, thank you, George. So today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we can use and how Drive Research leverages paid Facebook ads to find both survey responses and qualitative market research projects. So these are a little bit about the topics we'll cover today, both just the benefits of Facebook advertising, what it is, what it isn't. We'll share kind of like a case study or an example post of what we do on Facebook to encourage market research participation, when it works best, when it doesn't really work out, and then some uncontrollable circumstances of Facebook advertising. So first and foremost, the benefits. So using social media to find research participants is definitely not the first sampling method I think most research firms think to utilize. But from our experience, I will say there's definitely certain instances where using paid Facebook ads to find these participants is a lot better than a panel vendor. So these are kind of the benefits where we see Facebook a better fit than a panel. First and foremost, it's a lot greater reach. So we find sometimes the issue with using generic online panel firms is that they're limited to who they can collect feedback from. We find that many people sign up for several online panels because they're promised, incentives every time they take a survey. So they want to sign up for as many panels as possible to get as many incentives as possible. Whereas Facebook, you're really not recruited to that same audience. We shared some statistics here that as of July 2021, Facebook has 2 million active users. And there's another stat that there's 6 new profiles being created every second. So you're kind of always replenishing that reach of who you can kind of target for market research. And more aside from just the greater reach is that it's who you're targeting on Facebook. So, real life consumers. And by that, we mean that members of an online panel have taken plenty of screening surveys to kind of understand what answers qualify or disqualify them from being selected from a paid study. But with Facebook, recruiters are able to advertise to not only a larger audience, but to people who are not necessarily privy as to what answers would lead them to be chosen for a study. So we find that it helps us and it helps our clients kind of find that exact audience that they're hoping to target, but also gaining those truthful, honest answers. When you're using a panel, for example, you'd have to ask something like, are you a fan of the NBA? And people who are these professional survey takers kind of know, okay, yeah, sure, I'm a fan of the NBA, even though I'm not, just to qualify for that study. Whereas people on Facebook have no idea why we're even asking that. So they'll be honest with what their answer is. And you can even target NBA interest related pages and things like that to make sure you're really targeting the right audience. And then also a really good benefit is that we find that we get better open ends, especially when using this for a survey. So again, this kind of brings us back to the last point of panel respondents give shorter answers because they're trying to complete as many surveys as possible. Where again, Facebook respondents kind of go into a lot greater detail and they provide a lot more engaged responses because there's just that lack of knowledge around gaming the system to qualify. And, putting it, kind of thinking in their shoes, if they're scanning through Facebook, they're probably sitting on their couch, getting ready to go to bed. They see this ad, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of interested in this. I'll click into it and take a survey. So they're interested, they've signed up to give you that feedback, whereas panel respondents are kind of panel respondents are really just in it for that incentive. So next, when we say that we're leveraging social media for, market research, what necessarily is that? It's not organically posting something to your brand's Facebook page. If that were the case, you'd be promoting the upcoming research study to a really limited and general audience who have actively chosen to like or follow your Facebook page. And honestly, in most cases, this audience typically just includes more so like personal connections, with your coworkers, family, or friends, or maybe brand promoters that just want to see more so the culture side of your business. And as a result, if you're just advertising a research study to this audience, it's kind of just a group of more like-minded people, and you're really less control of the kind of people who are trying to take that screener survey or taking the survey itself. So that's why we find a lot more success and control over paid Facebook ads. So how we use it, it's targeted paid Facebook ads to reach your ideal participant based on whatever your qualifying criteria is, whether it's a certain age group, whether it's male or females. If you just want to target a county in New York State, they have really good interest targeting. The list really goes on and on with the possibilities of who you can target with paid Facebook ads. So for the purpose of this presentation, we'll definitely be focusing largely just on paid Facebook ads. I'll say we've tried things with LinkedIn, and there was a time when it worked really great. You could imagine it'd be a good location for, the B2B audiences. So when LinkedIn advertising hadn't really taken off, we were able to see good success from it. But now people are just more familiar with getting those, sponsored. I'm sure all of you get them at least once a week, those sponsored in-mail messaging. So people are used to kind of ignoring them or just not taking them seriously. Whereas we just find that there's more kind of engagement with paid Facebook ads. All right, so here is an example of a qualitative recruitment ad that we ran on behalf of a well-known soda brand. I'd say it's perhaps to date our most successful qualitative recruiting campaign on Facebook. So to give a little bit of background, the client came to us because they couldn't find enough participants from a panel in their specific markets. So they were targeting people in both Dayton, Ohio and Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the study itself required a lot of tasks. So it asked that participants download an app, visit a store, upload a receipt of the soda, take pictures and take videos of kind of their experience in purchasing the soda. And then lastly, the participant had to complete a follow-up survey 6 weeks after purchasing the soda. So very complex study, using that kind of in-depth type of study, plus adding on the fact that the markets were smaller, made it a really big challenge for people to find them on a panel. So they came to us and we utilized our just knowledge behind Facebook advertising for market research. And we were able to find them the audience that they were looking for. So, here we say 50 soda drinkers, but it was also varying other kind of qualifying criteria, such as, product usage or brand awareness, but just generalized, we'll say soda drinkers. So we were able to target, of course, people in Dayton, Ohio, and people in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They saw this ad that, here's the example of it. This is something that kind of scrolled on their Facebook. They clicked this link and they had to take a screener survey. So that allowed us to kind of ask pre-screening questions to learn if they'd even be qualified enough for the study. And from there, schedule them if we deemed that they were qualified. So as a result of this Facebook ad, we were able to pre-screen 182 qualified participants in Dayton and 157 qualified participants in Fort Wayne. And that resulted in a 92% completion rate for the 6-week study. So 92 people of the 100 people recruited were successful in completing all of those kind of steps that I had mentioned before. And lastly, a great price point too. I think this was even like half of the budget that we had predicted. So a total spend of $1,200 for 92 product testers as a result of a simple Facebook ad. So when does Facebook ads work best for market research? First and foremost, we definitely find that recruitment to paid studies work really well. It does work in gaining, survey responses, but we find better success because people are kind of guaranteed that paid incentive if we say sign up for an online focus group and you'll gain, $75 or whatever the incentive is, people are a lot more interested in that aside from, take a survey and we're raffling off a $100 gift card. They're more interested in that guaranteed incentive. Next, shorter screener surveys or just shorter surveys in general kind of goes back to the point Raymond was making about Reddit users. So we find that long surveys that take 5, 10 plus minutes just don't really work well on Facebook. People definitely tend to drop off and kind of exit the survey and just go back to scrolling on Facebook. If you want to compare the two audiences of a Facebook user and a panel user, people on panels sign up to take surveys. So they'll kind of go through a 10-minute survey if that means that they're going to get an incentive, whereas people are not on Facebook to take a survey. So they are easily get disengaged and easily kind of want to just go back to the reason that they were on Facebook, which is just to scroll and look at people's news feeds, not necessarily take a survey. So you have to make sure the survey is quick and really engaging. Next, the placement of the Facebook ad. So on Facebook, they give you a whole array of options as to where you want to display your ads. That could be on the news feed. It could be on Facebook Marketplace. You even have the option to advertise on Instagram, being that Facebook owns Instagram. So we've kind of toyed and played with all of these different locations, and we've found that the Facebook news feed is the best place where people are most likely going to see and interact with an ad. Testing a new product. So kind of similar to the case study that I just shared in the previous slide, people love testing new product concepts. So think, in-home usage tests or focus groups or, things where people feel like they are in the groundbreaking of a new product, whether it's a soda or it's just a new attraction coming to someone's community. Like they just love being in the ground running of providing that opinion. So that definitely is always of interest for Facebook users. And then lastly, low incident rate studies. So I'm going to actually hand this off to George. He'll probably do a better job at explaining that than I will.
Yeah, 2 quick examples here. One study we ran, we were looking for parents of children for a PBS study, children with 5-year-olds. And if you think about the incidence rate of that and targeting that with a general population in a place like Oklahoma City or Tucson, Arizona, or Anchorage, Alaska, you're going to rip through a lot of sample to try to find a parent of a 5-year-old. Facebook kind of scarily knows a lot about you based on your behavior and your profiles. So they actually have an interest bucket where we can go into Facebook and say, just show this recruitment ad to parents with children who are have children aged 5 to 7. So all of our spend and all of our budget is being contributed to a really low IR audience, and we're not showing it to general public. The other example I'll give is we were doing focus groups for a brand of cell phone. We were recruiting participants in Philadelphia and Chicago. The client for the groups were looking for someone who recently switched from an Android device to an iPhone or an iPhone to an Android device in the last 30 days. We're all loyalists to one or the other. It's a very dichotomous thing. So to try to find someone who switched in the last 30 days, the IR of that and the incidence rate is beyond, lower than 1% for sure. Again, Facebook knows a lot. They know how you access your Facebook account and what browser you're using and what device. That's all interest targeting. So what we're able to do is go into Facebook and say, just show me this ad of people who have accessed their device or their Facebook account through both an iOS operating system and an Android operating system in the past 30 days. Outside of the people who maybe have an Android tablet at home but use an iPhone, it helps us kind of narrow that audience. Again, it's not something that you can just, send a general email invite out and try to get people to come back. It really helps us hone our spend and make sure we're hitting on the right targets with a lot of the interest buckets they offer.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so when does, Facebook advertising not necessarily a good fit for market research? Small geographies, so when you're kind of getting into single zip codes, that's where it tends to just be too small of a reach for Facebook. The zip code itself could be a large population, but it's just going to target people who are kind of active Facebook users. And you're just going to cycle through the same audience who, if they saw your ad once or twice and didn't choose to click on it, they're probably not going to click on it again. So I think the smallest we like to go is probably county, but I think single zip code wise, it gets a little bit tricky. So kind of what George was saying, Facebook has a lot of information on us. They even used to have a lot more. In about 2010s, the personal data belonging to millions of Facebook users were collected without anyone's consent by a British consulting firm called Cambridge Analytica. Not sure, who's familiar with that whole lawsuit, but finally in 2018, it came to light that they were collecting all this data on Facebook users without us knowing. And they were forced to strip a lot of that third-party data. So, good for, a Facebook user, but in the terms of market research, it stripped our capabilities of targeting anything by, specific ethnicities or targeting anything by household income. There's kind of ways around it. The example I sometimes use is that there's not a bucket that you can target, household incomes of 50,000 or household incomes of 100,000. But there's interest buckets around SNAP or WIC or things like that you can kind of try to do interest targeting around, low households or low income households, but it's not guaranteed as well it is as you're checking off like a gender box. Political or sensitive topics. So as you can imagine, if you've ever kind of seen the funny things like Facebook trolls, they're very confident and they will say whatever they want on your ads. So if it gets into politics or any sensitive topics, they'll have no problem kind of saying really, really harsh language on the ad. You cannot turn off comments. You can hide comments and you can kind of moderate them, but it turns into probably more work than it's worth. So we try to steer away from those overly political topics. This is an interesting one. So any people or brands that are new to Facebook advertising, Facebook puts a spend cap on new advertisers to kind of make sure that you are following the rules, you're not spamming people, you are able to pay the budget that you put into Facebook. So I believe they cap it at $50 a day for new advertisers. And eventually that cap gets eliminated, but there's no hard and fast rule as to when they'll take that spend cap off. So sometimes it's tough if you really need sample really quickly. That $50 a day is just not going to do it. Your spending obviously varies based off of who exactly you're looking for, but it is sometimes a challenge for new Facebook advertisers. So oftentimes that's why for our clients, we will just run them on the Drive Research Facebook advertising account. And then lastly, routing respondents to a different brand's landing page. Facebook has a lot of rules as to what they'll approve and what they'll disapprove of an ad, and they actually have a manual review process. So one of those things that they look for is if you are, say Drive Research has a Facebook ad and we are sending respondents to a different landing page. So, someone's hosting their survey on their own domain. They will not allow that. It needs to be, if Drive Research is advertising, it needs to be that same landing page where we are sending them to a Drive Research domain or URL. It's just kind of one of those small things that Facebook looks for. It's definitely new in the world of market research. I don't think many people are doing it. So we have to kind of stay within the confines of their rules for other people. Lastly, I just wanted to talk through some uncontrollable circumstances with Facebook ads. Again, you're kind of in their own world and you kind of have to play to their rules and just the different scenarios of Facebook advertising. So for example, you're also competing with other advertisers. So we had an instance where we were trying to target a specific county and we needed both males and females, and we were really struggling to get male survey responses. We were putting so much money every day on it, and it was not moving the needle for male responses. And then one night we just came back and the ad had blown up and we had gotten so many mail responses. So what that kind of tells us is that there was another advertiser who was kind of targeting that same audience as us. And there's only so much space that Facebook will allow in their newsfeed to be for ads. So they could have been spending more than us. The ad could have just resonated more with that audience and they were getting that display space over us. And then their campaign ended and it was our turn to kind of attract that audience. So things that, you're not really in control of there. Again, just the Facebook ad review process, like I was saying earlier, market research is definitely new to them. So we've even found where we'll do the same exact ad in, let's say, Chicago, and then we'll have that same exact ad in New York City, and it'll get approved in New York City, but it won't get approved in Chicago for, a random reason. It's whoever is reviewing your ad that day and how generous they're feeling. But for the most part, we kind of know what they'll approve and what they won't approve. So we have it kind of down to a science. And then lastly, just again, the little stipulations of what you can and can't include in the ad. You're not allowed to say things like, we're looking for females with blue eyes who are right-handed, whatever your criteria is. In Facebook's eyes, we understand as market research why people do that and what you're looking for. You have quotas, but in the eyes of Facebook, they're seeing that as you are just being biased towards one type of person, and they want you to be inclusive of all types of people. So if you kind of outwardly say that you're looking for a certain type of person with certain characteristics, they're going to kind of flag that. And lastly, sometimes they'll allow you to say if there's an incentive attached to the market research study. Sometimes they allow it, sometimes they don't. Again, it's based off who's approving it, but they basically don't want it to come off as that you are spamming people or scamming people to collect their information in return for, a fake promotion. So they don't want you to, even if you're not doing that, sometimes it comes off as, oh, we are collecting your name and your email and your interests, and we're going to pretend that we're going to give you money, but we're not really going to do that. In the eyes of Facebook, they think that's the case, but we know it's not. So just being cognizant of that language. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. We do have a featured resource on our blog called The Ultimate Guide, How to Use Social Media to Find Research Participants. It's a very in-depth ultimate guide that really goes into kind of all of these things that we discussed here today, but in a lot more detail. It's something that we love to do. We blog Monday through Friday. We're always publishing new content. So definitely check that out. Definitely can open the floor to any questions if you have time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I've been wanting to better understand what people do with Facebook for a while. So I think we do have just maybe 1 minute for a question, and there's one in the chat. So maybe we can quickly answer that and then make sure we leave time for the next talk. So the question I think is about, you said something about people who might see your ad but haven't clicked on it after a couple of times. I think the question was about varying the ads, like having different images, maybe different messages, if that would help.
Yeah, so that's a really good example.
Much.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Facebook has analytics, and one of those are frequency. So if your frequency is starting to get above 3, 4, 5, that's pretty much when you're going to want to replace your image. So change whatever that ad image is, update the copy. Those are probably the two easiest things to update, and that will kind of refresh Facebook's ad frequency and kind of get you back in people's newsfeed.